Hello, this is Stuart Sampson from New Wave Occupational Health and Safety Services. I want to introduce you to our new training tracking database. This database is a Microsoft Access app, which means those with Microsoft 365 or Office 365 or simply Microsoft Access can run it directly. It can also be accessed on iOS and Android systems through the Windows Remote Desktop app. That being said, let's get right to this app and look at its features. The app is launched simply from Windows Explorer or whatever file management system you have on your computer, laptop, or tablet. Simply clicking the icon will start access and get you into the app. Once you're in the app, you'll be greeted with this screen and the icon to click here to start the app. Clicking there will bring you to the navigation page. And from here, you will manage all of the features of this app. On the left-hand side, you have a series of forms where you'll be able to enter all of the data you want. And then a whole series of reports for the real power of the system to get the data back out. To go through looking at the forms, you have a form for location or region. In this case, we have some sample data. So we have Halifax, Nova Scotia, Dartmouth, Nova Scotia, Toronto, Ontario, Ottawa, Vancouver. We can add a new location very easily, simply clicking New Location, and we can open our Waterloo office in Ontario. And there it is. For American customers, we have the province and territories replaced by states, with all the various states listed. There's a place to record the departments in which your employees work. In this case, we have production, maintenance, and sales in there. We can very simply add one for administration. And there it is. We have job titles, and our sample database has a whole series of job titles: mechanic, painter, laborer, supervisor, sales. Adding a new job title, we can add in our training coordinator. And there they are. The skills is a slightly different aspect of this app. Traditionally, apps record the course title. Problem with that is that if you have a course for Introduction to PowerPoint and PowerPoint Basics and PowerPoint Level 1, your database sees them as 3 separate courses. So asking who has PowerPoint training becomes a very complicated task, as you have to find all 3 versions of the name. In this app, things are managed through skills. So the PowerPoint Basic, PowerPoint Level 1, Introduction to PowerPoint is simply a PowerPoint skill. So while we do record the course names, we look at the skill that people are trying to find, independent of the course name. So here on this slide we have First Aid Emergency, which is often called 6-hour first aid or emergency first aid. It can be called First Aid from St. John Ambulance, First Aid from Red Cross, all kinds of names for it, but it's all simply First Aid Emergency. And we can go through. We have Standard, WHIMS, Defensive Driving, Dealing with People. You can have as many or as few skills as you want. Once you have the skills, you can attach them to various jobs. So in this case, our mechanic has mandatory skills of lockout, WHIMS, first aid, and confined space entry. Our painter simply has WHIMS. We can go to our training coordinator, and we can say we want our training coordinator to be able to deal with people. And that's it. we now have dealing with people as a mandatory skill for the training coordinator. We have the training providers. So who actually gave the training course? This will allow you to track how much training is being given by any of your providers, to allow you to equalize training or to apply for bulk discounts, whichever you want. We have the internal as a default option in there. And in the sample database, we have ourselves in there, and we have St. John Ambulance. You can add as many or as few training providers as you want. And we have training types. Not so recently, classroom training was dominant, but with physical distancing from COVID-19, online training has become very popular. These aspects, these types of training have different qualities, so it's important to track what type of training was involved in each course. In this case, we have previous training as an option. So if someone comes to your company from another organization where you don't have the details of the class name and the date and the provider and all the other things, you can simply record the training type as previous training. We have other types in here. We have online training, self-study, classroom, practical training, all of which we have mentoring, all of which can be chosen, and you can choose more than one type of training for a specific class. Now that we've populated the list, we can add employees. So we have, in this case, several employees already in there. So John Treen, Jane Smith, Albert Black. You can see for the jobs, the drop-down lists, we have the training coordinator is there, the one that we just added. We have administration, which we added, is now in the list. And Waterloo is now in the list. So as we populate the previous drop-down lists, they show up in the future forms. One thing, by default, employees, when you enter them, are listed as active employees off to the right here. If you want to enter historical data in, you must be sure to deselect the active button so that the reports will run correctly. And if you make a mistake, don't worry, you can go back and deselect it. Or if an active employee leaves the company, then you can simply go back to this form and deselect active. All of the data will be saved, it's just they'll no longer be listed as active. With all that being done, we can now go to enter classes. I mentioned before that the database records the class name, and here it is, Emergency First Aid. But more importantly, it runs based on skills. And here the skill is First Aid Emergency. You can see the drop-down list has a list of all of the various skills that we have in our database. So we also have First Aid Standard in this sample database, as well as forklift, tag out, a whole series of others. The class date gets recorded simply using a calendar feature, and the expiry period. In this case, expiry period, you'll see the expiry date is currently blank because this field is blank. The first aid lasting for 3 years, we put in 36 months. The app will calculate the expiry date based on the class date. You can also enter the duration, either in total hours, or you can break it up into theory hours and practical hours if you want. That becomes important later on if you need to prove to regulatory authorities that your training is proper. The duration of the training is one of the questions they're certain to ask. You can record whether the course has an exam or not, and you can record class documents like the agenda, the handouts, tests, slides, invoices, anything you want, so that when you recall this class from the database, all the information is at hand. To enter it, you simply double-click, and you can add as many files as you want, any file type that you want. A place for the instructor name and the instructor qualifications. Again, for regulatory authorities, to ask about the quality of the training, you can put the trainer's resume in there, or you can leave it blank. You have a place for training provider. Now this title here is Emergency First Aid St. John Ambulance, but the training provider listed as New Wave. We can, on this page, make the correction and correct that to St. John Ambulance. There's a place here for cost per student or cost per class. If you use the cost per class, then that will work into the cost reports, which we'll get into later. And the method of instruction, emergency first aid being taught partially classroom, partially practical. Selecting both, and both get recorded in the database. Who attended the class? We can add as many or as few attendees as we want. Adding another attendee, so if you're a matter of going to the last line here and selecting, opening the drop-down list. So we can pick one at random. We can add Kathy McDonald, and we can say she did pretty well. She got 75, and that was a pass. So all of those things, that then becomes the class, is now fully entered. And go back here, say everything has now been saved. Access will save it automatically. And the last entry form is certificates. So the database also allows you to save on a personal basis the certificates of your employees in case you needed to demonstrate that a certain employee had a certificate. In this case, you can see myself, Stuart Sampson, and my first aid certificate. I can double click the PDF icon and I can click open, and Adobe Acrobat will open as it's a PDF file, and there is my certificate ready to print up here, or I can download it, I can save it in another location, I can email it, anything I want to do with that file. So that's how to get the data into the app. Getting the data out is a whole series of reports. Starting with the basic report, simply a list of the active employees. Their name, employee number, department, location, job. Employee number is an optional field. You see in some cases it's filled out, in some cases it's not. And we have a list of inactive employees. The database records inactive employees because it's important that the historical data be kept in case some regulatory authority comes and questions the information from perhaps several years ago. People might leave your employ and then want information about their training. So the app allows you to record that information. And getting into the nitty-gritty of it, here's the report based on employee of all of the courses they've taken. So we have here Sarah Adams, skill confined space, the class name have to be confined space as well, the class date, the grade, in this case there was no test, the expiry date is also automatically printed out. So we go through the whole series here, and if someone had taken a course more than once, such as Albert Black, taken emergency first aid in 2020 and a one-day first aid, which is the same skill, in 2018, both get recorded. So this report being a complete list of all employees, since it's all employees, there's indication here whether or not they are active. And a slightly simpler report same report, but simply filtered all the inactive employees are filtered out. So the active indication is now removed because everybody's active, but all of the other information stays the same. We had the skills for various people, and we can go and see their status. So in this case, Sarah has the skill of confined space entry, but because it's red, we see at the top, red means that the skill has expired. So this skill has expired. Scott Allen is okay for brazing in confined space, but his scissor lift and zoom boom have expired. And a yellow marker at the top means the skill will expire before September 13th, 2020, which is 3 months. So the formatting is set, so anything in yellow, anything in red has expired. Yellow will expire in the next 3 months. Green will expire within the next 6 months. And if you want, we can also adjust those for you on a custom basis, part of our customization option. As we go down, you see all the various skills listed, and you see now we pop up with some greens down here. But that being a very long report, it has the skills that expire possibly 2-3 years out. You're just interested in what you have to do now. So we have a report for the skills expiring within X months. And so you just want to know, what do I have to organize in the next 4 months? Then you get the same report, but this time it's organized differently. That it's organized by skill this time. So we can now see for brazing, we have all of these people who need to, who either have expired, in this case 8 people, brazing tickets have expired, and 2 people will expire within the next 4 months as we selected. So we have the potential for a class of 10 people. Similar for confined space entry, we have 5-6 people who have already expired, and 2 will expire in 4 months. We can organize a class for 8 people, and so on, depending on which skills you entered, and then all of the various data. We also list what are the mandatory skills for each employee. So Scott Allen is a painter, and he has WOH&S. So we saw in the data entry form that the mandatory skills are based upon the job. So a painter, we said mandatory skill was WOH&S. A laborer, mandatory skill is first aid. A mechanic, mandatory skills are 4 of them: first aid, WOH&S, lockout, and confined space. So we can see that the skills change depending on whatever setting we chose. So a supervisor can go call up a person's name and find out what skills that person is supposed to have. We have a list of skills. Rather than trying to track the skills based on a drop-down list, this report will list them for you in alphabetical order. And again, you can have as many or as few skills as you want. A list of employees with specific skills. So you may want to know who has, if you're bidding on a job, a contractor bidding on a job, you may want to know who has confined space training. So here is your list of all your staff with confined space training. You can see the red ones again have expired, so they would need upgrading. But if you're going to put in a bid and the tendering organization wanted the actual certifications, then these are the people whose certifications you can find and send in along with your bid. And we have a list of all certificates by person. So in this case, Devin Williams has these certificates. You can see again, red indicates that it expired. And this is all certificates, including ones that don't have an expiry date. There is a similar report, which is the list of certificates, but only ones with an expiry date. So a slightly shorter list for people, and you can see that Devin Williams is in pretty good shape, with the exception of his brazing ticket that needs to be updated. Joe Carter needs first aid. Stuart Sampson needs his emergency first aid as well. And you can print out these certificates. If you were bidding on a job, and again you wanted to see who had certificates in a specific skill, you can simply call up this report, list of all certificates for a specific skill. And as you go through here, you'll find this is your list of skills. As it says in the instructions, highlight and copy the name of the skill you want. Emergency first aid. Clicking here for step 2, paste in the skill, and it will report all of the people that have emergency first aid. It will only report the most recent one. So you'll see, in my case, I had taken a couple of first aid courses, only the most recent one is showing up. And lastly, we can get to reports on cost. So these ask you in what date range you want the costs. So you may say a year, a quarter. It doesn't actually matter. I'm simply going to enter in January 1st, 2010, simply to make it easy. You see the dialog box tells you the format, month, 3-letter month, day, and year. And then the last date, let's say July 1st, 2020. And there we go, the cost breakdown. So we're spending most of our money, 51.72% of our money, on standard first aid, followed by WHMS at about a quarter of the expenditures, and first aid emergency at slightly less. So as many skills as you have in your database and as much cost entry as you enter, this report will be populated. And a very similar report, but you may want the cost by provider. Again, it will ask you for a date range. So this is the date of the class, and we just use the same ones. January 1st, 2010, July 1st, 2020, and the same report, still a total of $2,900, but now broken down by providers. So in this case, internal training, most of the training being done by New Wave Services, roughly 3/4, and 1/4 being done internally. And this report will expand to as many providers as you have. And to close the database, we simply click Close the database. And that's it. Pretty straightforward and easy, designed to be a very easy system. It can also be used to track any training. So while New Wave is an occupational health and safety services firm, the database can also be used to track computer training, human resources training, any type of training that you want. You can even use it to track attendance at conferences if you wanted to do that. So as far as next steps, if you wanted to get a closer look and you wanted to see the database that I've been demonstrating for yourself and play around with it a bit, just email us and we'll send you this database for free. Just for your information, it's 14 megabytes large. If you want to use the database, we'll send you a blank one with a user's guide for $50, and a blank database with your own branding and colors for $100. Also, we provide optional services. You can ask for a quote to import your historical data. Usually that's about $50, but in some cases it may be more depending upon how much cleanup we need to do with the data. If there's a report that you think you might want the database to produce for you that's not in our list, just give us a call, send us an email, and we'll give you a cost, how much it would cost to create that report for you. And that cost, of course, varies with the complexity of the report. And some organizations, some of our clients, simply ask us to manage their training records for them, which we're more than happy to do. Just give us a call and we'll send you a quote to do that as well. So thank you for your attention. Feel free to contact us, 902-402-1618, for any of your questions. Or you can go to our website, or you can email us, newwaveohs2016@gmail.com. And that's it. Thank you very much for your attention, and we look forward to hearing from you soon.